Hello, everyone. Welcome to Breakout B4, Plant Forward in an Evolving World, Keeping Agro-Diversity on the Plate. We are grateful to the sponsor of this breakout, Food at Google, for assembling this group of culinary leaders for our session today. As a reminder, the link to the demo recipe that will be showcased in this session is available below the video player. And please remember to enter your questions or comments in the chat throughout the session for our moderator to address. Now, without further ado, I'd love to welcome our presenter to the screen, and I will hand it off to Ben Tamlyn, who is the Bay Area Culinary Director for Compass at Google. So thank you all so much for joining us today. And Ben, I will hand it off to you.
Thanks very much, Shara. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our breakout session. First of all, thanks to the CIA for inviting us to present today and to hosting another wonderful year of the Global Plant Forward Summit, although via online. We're excited to talk and present to you today about our approach to plant forward and agro-biodiverse pastry grab and go, especially during these strangest of times. Today, I'm joined by some of my esteemed colleagues. I'll hand it over to Steph.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, I'm Stephanie Cook. I'm our Global Culinary Education Manager for Compass at Google and have been on the account for nearly 3 years.
Thank you, Steph. Christoph.
Hi, Ben, and thank you for having me. I'm Christoph Loy. I'm the Global Culinary Director for Compass at Google, and I'm with Compass for the last 3.5 years.
Thank you. Last but not least, William.
Hello, everyone. I'm William Warner. I'm the Regional Executive Pastry Chef for the Bay Area, and I've been on the team for about 1.5 years now.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, team. I'll be questioning these folk after Chef William takes us through one of his innovative, delicious, and thought-provoking grab-and-go dessert recipes in a moment. We know the last 12 months have been incredibly challenging, and for us, moving into pre-packaged grab-and-go was a significant shift in our food delivery model. Food presents comfort during times of high stress and anxiety. Food is an incredible emotional driver. We set out to ensure the food we create delivers a heightened level of experience and offers peaks to our users, providing that much needed comfort and a highlight to their day. We've made so much progress in our plant forward, sustainability and agro-diversity initiatives over the last few years. We didn't see a change in our delivery model as a reason to neglect these values. Instead, we worked hard to weave these initiatives through our grab-and-go menus and dishes, whilst ensuring we offer moments of surprise and delight to our users. Sustainability, plant forward, and agro-diversity are not second thoughts. So, how are Chef William and his team continuing to shift the dial on plant forward and agro-diverse innovation in the modern pastry kitchen? Well, let's see.
All right, Chef. Well, we're going to give you a glimpse into a product that we like to describe kind of as a plant-driven, flavor-forward approach on our pastry program. And we're going to start off with a banana flour cake. And in that, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hydrate our chia seeds for a chia egg. This is a step that's often overlooked. You should really take some time to go ahead, have your chia seeds a little bit coarsely ground, and add water to them and allow them to rest minimum maybe 15 minutes so that they can really start to gel and thicken, as this is the replacement for your egg. We base it off a 1:2 ratio. So about for an egg replacement, that's a tablespoon to 2.5 tablespoons of water. For the cake build itself, while the chia seeds hydrate, we're going to add some banana puree, some grapeseed oil, and some tourmaline to a food processor. This is a great cake and a simplistic cake and an easy way of doing it that I hope can inspire not only the home cook, but professional culinarians alike. We're going to add our chia seeds. Now that they've been fully rehydrated, look at that, nice, thick, viscous. You can see they've gelled and are really holding that water content, and that's what we're looking for. So again, about 15-20 minutes minimum. We're going to add that to the food processor. And again, back to this being nice and easy, there's no gluten in this recipe. This is made with banana flour and banana puree. And that's something to note here on the way that we approach creating these products. It gives us a bit more round flavor. We'll take and add these dry ingredients. Again, green banana flour, confectioner's sugar, touch of salt, and our leavening agent, which is baking powder. We'll add those into the food processor. And we're not concerned here with developing gluten. This is a great, simple cake to make. It's a soft, light sponge flavored with the full round flavor of a ripe banana. The aroma is incredible. The texture is great. And again, that balance of ripe and green banana flour is just beautiful. I think we've all baked enough banana bread for the pandemic that this is kind of an elevated take on that. So we'll put in our Roboku. Again, wets on the bottom, dries on the top. We'll pulse a bit to get it going. And then during this process, a good scrape is always key, ensuring that your dry and wets are homogeneous and well mixed. Again, we're not worried about developing gluten or getting this to be gummy, but you could, letting it go too long, incorporate unnecessary air into the product, which would give you some not so great characteristics in the finish and final bake. So we'll blend this together. You can see it's homogeneous. We're going to get ready to go ahead and spread this out and bake our cake. So I've got a great tool to introduce to you here. Again, hoping that you take some tips and tricks. This is a replette. And this is basically set to a 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch thickness, rather, for our cake. And this is a great tool that we use that ensures like uniformity and consistency, allowing for really even bake in the process. And for the staff, the efficiency aspect is granted here we're doing 1 cake, but imagine 8 of these silpats lined up on a table and a larger batch of batter poured out and spread, literally can spread uniform, consistent cakes in a matter of minutes. So by applying like a nice even pressure, you're going to gently pull your cake through. Notice also too, it's going to give us a good yield aspect where we're following those lines on the edge of the silpat, adding a little bit to each corner, making sure that it's even, no air bubbles and or pockets happening there, and pulling all the way through for what I like to call a perfect carpet. Notice it's on a silpat. Silpats are great for moisture retention and also ease of removing the cake. We're going to add a few little additional components on top of here, a little demerara sugar for a little crunch. And then we also have some just raw cocoa nib that we will add as well, again for textural contrast, and it's going to help in our final garnish. So again, on that topic of this aspect of a fruit flour and a fruit in 2 different forms, we've really tried to explore that a bit more in our pastry development and recipe development. And I kind of wanted to give you another example of that, where if we take a look at the winter squash loaf, we've got butternut squash flour and roasted squash. It's really giving you a more depth of flavor. The aroma is intense and you can really feel the product through this. And some of the ways you look at this aren't always flavor driven. Sometimes they're textural driven as well. And so if we dip into Agro-Diverse or ancient grains, we can look at the Kamut maple madeleine as an example. Kamut gives it a really nice tenderness, buttery, nutty. That golden hue really complements the madeleine in the bake, and is just overall delicious and pairs brilliantly with the maple. Like to really dig into teff. I feel like it has a really good contrast to hazelnut. So if we're looking for a nut-free product, it gives us a little bit of that great chocolate pairing and nut vibe with an additional texture that only teff can bring along. And for some other aspects, again, back to the chieg or different oil-based vegan cakes, we've done a few chocolate with aquafaba buttercreams where we've incorporated a unique chocolate into that, giving us a really great textural contrast. Presentation's beautiful, and a layering of flavors. And on the note of that chocolate, that brings us to our next step here, which is where we're going to create a beautiful gianduja to go on top of our banana cake. So gianduja, what is it? Normally it's a dark chocolate blended with a nut. Think hazelnut or almond, 70% chocolate, 30% nut. It helps provide a softness to that chocolate, takes away the that snap, but provides a beautiful mouth feel and really great harmonious flavor profile of chocolate and nuts. Here we've taken a nod to that and used tahini with a touch of salt and a chocolate from Valrhona called Yuzu Inspiration, which is essentially cocoa butter, freeze-dried yuzu, and some sugar. Now, what's amazing about this is this adds not only great flavor and texture, but an unexpected acidity with that great mouthfeel. So we're going to temper these products together, and we're going to do that by tabling. So we're looking at bringing the tahini, the chocolate, and the salt to 45 degrees Celsius and spreading that out onto a cool, clean, sanitized marble surface. There's often some misconception about tabling. It's difficult. I'm here to show you it's really not that difficult. Just takes a little practice and a little time, but will give you a very quick result and a great temper. So being that this does have the tahini in it, it's a little bit more liquid and a little bit more loose than, as you would say, a normal just chocolate that you're tabling. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. The purpose of this process is we're rapidly cooling down the chocolate. We're adding agitation, which is inherently causing the crystallization and putting our chocolate in temper. So ideally, the swing here is 45 Celsius, melting all the crystals, cooling down with agitation at about 27 Celsius, and then your working temperature, 30. And that little buffer there is just to ensure that you can put the chocolate in a mold or in an acetate or do with it what you need to without it setting on you and disrupting that crystallization process. In the case of this gianduja today, we're going to use this to apply to the top of our cake and build another component into the layers of our build and adding another flavor, another dimension, and a really beautiful presentation aspect. If you still at the end of this video are a little bit afraid of tabling, seeding is fine. I would just recommend pulling 33% of the chocolate prior to melting out and then seeding it back in the chocolate to temper. And so as you can see, even on the table, we can just go ahead and take a temperature along the way. Not a big deal, very easy, slow and steady wins the race here. That aspect of the tahini added into this will create a little bit more loose gianduja in terms, but that savory, salty touch really makes those flavors pop and your brain happy. And that is just, again, adding on a level of layers and complexity to this. So once we've achieved our temperature, chocolate is all back in the thermal mass. We're going to break out our friend, the raclette again, not sponsored by Raclette, but they do work really well in the kitchen. And I'm a big fan. Underneath that, we have a piece of acetate, which is a food grade plastic that is cut to the dimensions of the cake. And then the raclette itself is set to a very thin setting, about 1/16, to give us a nice, even, thin plaque of yuzu sesame gianduja. This is another application that we've explored, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit more later. But this is a great way, again, to surprisingly add acidity into a really beautiful, creamy mouthfeel. At room temperature, once it sets, it will be solid, and therefore adding another texture to the element of the cake, and one that becomes creamy as that chocolate and cocoa butter coats the mouth. The acidity is what's just a beautiful thing here in providing us something that normally is difficult to incorporate into pastry, but I often look for ways to do. So as we spread it out nice and thin, we'll allow that to just get a little bit matte, about a minute or so. And then we will gently pick up our acetate, the gianduja, and just like a tablecloth, lay it on top of the cake. You can see again the cocoa nib I referenced before coming through as a little bit of a garnish there, which is really nice. And we're going to go ahead and incorporate the 1, 2, 3 flip method so that my top becomes my bottom, which will allow the weight of that cake to set on that gianduja and make sure we get a good adhesion there. And I'll place it back on the marble. As we all know, sheet pans are not the flattest instruments in the kitchen. Few sheet pans on top just for added weight, and we're going to allow that to crystallize for about 10 minutes before we throw it in the fridge. If that seems a little bit too much, hey, make that cake batter, pipe it into a financier mold, make your gianduja, dip them in, throw some sesame seeds on it, and it's a great afternoon tea. It's a great bento box application. Again, that chocolate creaminess, the banana flavors, the acidity of the yuzu, it's really bright, it's really intriguing. Some other aspects that we've worked with in the gianduja are a sunflower butter and strawberry gianduja, which we filled a quinoa bite with, again, providing a nice burst of fruit flavors, crunch, again, textures. Texture, texture, texture. Another way to think of chocolate too is sometimes as a barrier in applications. In this case, we've taken and coated a simple 1, 2, 3, 4 crumble. It's been baked and crispy, placed it on top of a little pear gelée on top of a celeriac panna cotta. Really unexpected twists and turns of flavor profiles, and again, very textural. So coming into our final component, which is our whipped espresso, we're going to add hot water in the bottom of the KitchenAid bowl. We're going to add our instant espresso and our granulated sugar. The sugar here can be based a little bit sweeter or not as much, depending on preference and what dish you're applying it to. This is an intense product. I suggest using it sparingly. It's a very cool trending product, and I think it should be in everyone's toolkit because it's very easy to do and the results are huge. So minimal effort, maximum results. We're going to stir this together to ensure everything melts and dissolves accordingly prior to placing our whip on the KitchenAid. So on the KitchenAid, I would recommend medium high. It'll give you smaller bubbles, which will give you a more stable foam. If you whip it on high speed, you'll find that sometimes that foam and development of air often deflates quickly. This gives you a much more stable, clean, glossy product that we are able to pipe. So this is the final component to our build. And just to revisit that discussion of what is the 3 components and how do they all mean to the final build? We have our banana flour banana cake. For me, that's an anchor component. Everyone can get behind banana. It's interesting, it's full round. That's complemented by that yuzu sesame gianduja for acidity and creaminess, and then introducing a final textural component of a whipped espresso, which gives you a nice, lightened, but intense coffee flavor and aroma. So on that note, looking at some other desserts in the past and some other ways to think about this product, we're going to talk about 3 more dishes. Instead of building the cake out completely and layering everything on it, think of them again as individual and perhaps doing a verrine aspect, where you have actually taken caramelized bananas, the cake in cubes, and some of the gianduja broken into shards for a wonderful dessert in a glass. Another way to think about the anchor format and unexpected twists and turns is perhaps the anchor is actually just a classic product. In this case, a snickerdoodle, where all we've done is elevated this composition with the addition of some turmeric. Everyone knows it. Everyone loves a nice, soft, chewy snickerdoodle with a little bit of cinnamon, but that turmeric provides just a little bit more contrast, a little bit elevated flavor, and a beautiful golden hue. And on the topic of simplicity, think about your fruit and vegetable pairings. Here, a Japanese yam with blood orange, where we've used raw blood orange, the juice as a light gel, and then taken the skin and candied it to provide a textural contrast. So simplicity, but yet contrasting vegetable and fruit. That being said, let's put this together. We've got our cakes that have been cut. Don't forget that piece of acetate, which actually comes in very handy for preservation in a freezer or refrigerator. Got our piping bag of the coffee, so we'll do a couple different mounds. Think about every bite getting those 3 harmonious products and flavor profiles. And notice the nice sheen, the nice hold. This is a really simplistic, beautiful showstopper product to work with. And let's not forget about that allergen, that sesame that's in that gianduja. We like to take toasted sesame seeds and add a pinch of fleur de sel and fill a little gamasio grinder and just use that to garnish the final cake and product. Gives it a fun confetti look, but also lets anyone know that's about to indulge that it does have sesame in it. And I really hope that you take away from this, 3 plant forward components that can be adapted to suit your menu needs. If it's a catering aspect, if it's making dessert at home, it's a great way to approach a flavor forward, plant driven pastry product. Thanks so much.
Wow. Thank you very much, Will. That was absolutely fantastic. I love the way you broke it down into the component pieces, and you were able to translate that into different food models, delivery models. You can serve it in a glass, use them as separate components across all different lines of business. Really, really fantastic. And I feel really hungry right now because I haven't had dinner yet. So thank you. We've had a couple of questions in from the audience that I'd like to put past you. First one, this comes from Michael Graham. Is the pulsing in the food processor better than a mixer because of the air?
The pulsing, I would recommend pulsing in the beginning just to get things wet and get it moving. And then just a consistent blend, a scrape and consistent blend. Yeah, if you do just continue to pulse, 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 you can incorporate more air, and I think the process takes longer.
Okay. Okay. So what we're not looking to incorporate too much air.
No, I'm sorry. We are not looking to incorporate air. You have a leavening agent in there. There's no need.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Another question as well. This comes from Katami Lentz, who we all know very well. Chef William, is there a significant amount of trial and error when testing recipes with new or alternative ingredients like banana flour, ancient grains, and chia egg?
Yes and no. I think today there's so much information out there, right? The accessibility of the internet, the blogs, the forums, the professional chefs. I think if you do your due diligence, planning a tactile approach, in this case, banana flour, we can use 30% less than flour. I didn't learn that by doing that. I learned that by reading up on banana flour and then using that approach. So I think it's 2-stage. Yes, if you go straight to the second one where you're just making and baking, you're going to be in the kitchen a long time. If you really kind of sit down and plan out your strategy, I think you can gather enough intel and data to get the one close to the mark on the first try.
Great. Jonas Andreasen out of Denmark asked, he stated that he hasn't seen green banana flour in Denmark. How widespread is this product? And maybe you want to give some props out to the supplier?
It's becoming, I can't speak for Denmark, but for the States, it's readily available. I can get it next day prime on Amazon. No problem.
So Jonas, maybe check Amazon. Okay, well, thank you for your patience for the rest of the panel board. Appreciate that. Was a great presentation and sets us up nicely for a bit of a Q&A session. I'm actually going to kick it off with William, as you're on a roll. Okay. You've just given some really great examples of how we're really switching the needle and pushing things forwards from an innovation point of view when we're talking about plant forward, agro-diversity in the pastry kitchen. But for you, what really defines the modern balanced plant forward pastry kitchen?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and one that I've noodled on for quite some time. And I think for me a bit, I could process it in my mind, but trying to disclose that information or download that information to my staff and my cooks and fellow chefs, I found difficult, because it was a plant forward dessert can be, almost anyone can spin a dessert into like, well, it's plant forward, right? I mean, it's just flour and, sugar. These are all coming from plants. So the debate there got kind of odd for me. And the application of saying, hey, we've put a vegetable in it, now it's a plant forward dessert. So with my team and I, this became a constant topic, and where we decided to land of looking at our programming, the multiple menu aspects, and defining what plant forward was, is really taking it to a percentage. So for us to have a discussion, for us to ideate, for us to develop, it's got to be 70% minimum plant matter for it to work. And I think what's interesting about that is, if you look at the case of the banana flour cake, you could replace that chia egg with an egg. Perhaps you want more richness. Perhaps you need to incorporate some aeration into it and use the body of the egg or egg white for that lift. But you could also keep it with the chia egg, and instead of hydrating it with water, you could hydrate it with coffee if you want more coffee flavor. So I want my chefs and my cooks, and even myself, to when we approach these products, I understand the building blocks of how much plant matter needs to be in there, but also look at the key in, which is that flavor and that texture. So how can we design with flavor forward and be plant driven at the same time? That's what's really helped us, I think, hit the mark in developing the plant forward program here.
That's a great answer. I definitely noticed a trend, I suppose, in the way you apply that thought process to what you create. I mean, a great example of that is the butternut squash loaf. You know, it's taking the ingredient and using it in multiple different ways to create the texture, the depth of flavor. And it really struck me when you mentioned about rehydrating the chia seeds with coffee. You can almost imagine that in your mind's taste buds, I suppose, about that impact of flavor, while still using it as an integral part of the recipe to create that lift. Really, really cool. Thank you,
Awesome.
Will.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Next up, Christoph. So obviously agro-biodiversity is incredibly important. It's one of our main initiatives throughout our account. What strategies are being used to promote the use of biodiverse crops within the Food at Compass at Google program? That was a bit of a mouthful, wasn't it?
Thank you, Ben. And just before maybe I answer this question, I just wanted to comment on William. You know, what I liked also about is that, and Ben mentioned it briefly, the component and how you build different desserts, right? Which brings a lot of, you know, I guess in today's environment, efficiencies and, you know, cross-utilization of product and how to utilize waste, right? So just by presenting it different, I think it's super important. And it kind of ties into Agro-Diversity and, you know, how do we promote it? So one of the things that we do within the Compass at Google account is the first thing is really inform our chefs about the benefit and the impacts of agro-diverse crops, right? So, you know, and it considers the, you know, the benefit of the planet, but also the benefit of the community. And we think about regenerative crops and crops that can, you know, where the soil benefits, where they're more water resistant, so we use less of that. And then as far as the community is, how can we help the community to thrive that are probably less fortunate? So one, I think, really provide them with the whys and why are we doing it. Then the next step we did is we kind of created a list of approximately 70 different products, crops that we share globally. And then we let the sites, depending on location, pick the ones that are most reliable to source at their location, and kind of ties also into their concept and programming. Not every cafe that we operate within the Google environment is exactly the same, you know, concept and runs the same food program. So then we encourage our chefs to create, to focus on maybe 1 to 2 crops per quarter or per season, if it's seasonally relevant. And what we want them to do is really try to leverage that item to eventually take a place or reduce the place of a commercial grown crop, right? So, and while the chefs are creating those new dishes and new recipes, we also ask them to share them, because it's really fun to see what India may be doing and how, you know, what crops that they use, or if we in the Americas, maybe in San Francisco or we in Seattle, and we learn what, you know, what maybe London or Zurich has done. It's truly inspirational. And then we do those, we share those recipes. And then lastly, what we do is we also track. We have, you know, how do we track the success? We look at our purchases at the beginning of the year and then see how we progress. And when we do introduce new crops, the crops that we featured maybe the previous month, we try to carry them on. And, you know, as we highlight new ones, but we keep them in the program again, is to over a period of time, we will become more and more dependent on agro-diverse crops and replace some of the commercial crops.
Thank you so much. was very interesting to hear about, you know, how we engage with our teams, and that training piece is so important. I think, you know, feeling part of something and having that passion to really drive our initiatives home is so key. And that cues me up nicely for the next question with Stephani. So, Steph, how do the chefs respond to learning in depth about sustainability, biodiversity, agro-diversity, and what is the most effective way of getting this message to land?
Thanks, Ben. Actually, that was a great tee up, Christoph, I think, because time and time again, we really see that people really enjoy the opportunity to learn more, and that it helps them see their role in the bigger picture. So I think anything we can do to bring it back to food, what they do every day, and challenging them to be creative within the parameters that we need to meet sustainability goals is great. As you say, kind of learning about other crops, practices, products around the world that chefs are using is really exciting for them. So it kind of gives them, sometimes we'll have these great aha moments in training that'll really open up people's lens. During a training we had run, you know, sometimes the focus is so on reducing meat, but we had a moment where we were talking about the water footprint of a pizza during a training, and there was no meat on the pizza, but it was, you know, 50% of the footprint was mozzarella. And I think a lot of people walked away with this, you know, dairy kind of felt invisible, but it was such a big thing that people were kind of like, wow, there's so much opportunity there just to think about dairy and how to play with that. So I think that, and having an element of competition can be really helpful in motivating the chefs, challenging them to prepare a meal as we've done using the NOR Future 50, Foods for a Healthier Planet, and seeing really how many of those foods are accessible to them. It gives them a sense of agency and a place to be creative, even in their own home and also at work.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Some good examples there. I love the whole idea of gamifying, adding that competition. I think we're all quite competitive within this industry, so it's great to really hone in on that. Maybe you could give us a few more examples of some of the training we've used to support our plant forward goals during COVID, where everything changed so quickly.
Sure. I think, you know, as we started to go into lockdown and immediately started turning our brains toward how can we train, how can we use this time to bring our teams together, you know, initially started brainstorming a little program initially called Quarantine Kitchen. The name did not survive very long. But ultimately, we were able to partner with Arizona State University's Sweetie Center for Sustainable Food Systems and produce a 5-part series called Replant Your Menu. So it really connected themes of nutrition, sustainability, and culinary. So over this 5 weeks, we had nearly 400 chefs from 23 countries around the globe participating, tuning in for these trainings and going back to their homes, cooking for their families, to give them a theme around sustainability, nutrition, and interpret as they would, discuss with their families and prepare something. So I think being able to leverage that, you know, that global nature, getting people to share and collaborate, it was really a big thing for the chefs to develop those relationships during that time and feel close, even though we were all so far apart. So that is one great example. And I think our continued development with the CIA on Plant Forward Kitchen, a new training program that'll enable us to coach our teams on Plant Forward. We've spent, you know, a year plus in development, a large working group, really thinking through how we can make the challenges we face in our global food system more relatable, more approachable to chefs, and actively getting them involved in the solution. So I think having this program and creating, fostering mentorship relationships between the chef and the line level is going to help us bring that next generation up in the ways of plant forward cooking and learning to deliver that at scale.
It definitely doesn't feel like a fad anymore. You know, there's a lot of things come and go, you know, molecular gastronomy, many different fads, I suppose, but this is something that feels set in stone. And I think you're right. I think the next generation of culinarians and consumers as well. I mean, my 5-year-old turned vegetarian 3 weeks ago. and he is absolutely staunch in never eating meat again, which is really interesting. When I was 5 years old, I don't think I even knew what a vegetarian was, but that was a long, long time ago. I also loved what you said about replant your menu, because I think that connection across all of our global accounts is so important, because sometimes it feels like the challenges that you have only sit with you in your region or your country, but actually when you get to connect with others, your colleagues around the world, you understand that we all face such similar challenges and similar opportunities, I guess. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways I've had from attending the Plant Forward Summit in the past, which I've been incredibly lucky to do a couple of times. But those networking opportunities, you know, listening, talking, hearing, sharing is so important. And it's amazing that we can continue to do that within our account virtually, but also be able to continue these summits as well virtually. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Steph. Christoph, can you share what focus areas are being worked on around sustainability within our account at the moment?
So we're going to continue with the Agro-Diversity initiative, where we continue to feature new crops. We will share recipes. We will share stories. We will link chefs together. It's amazing that energy that it creates, similar to what Ben just mentioned. Attending a conference is great. It's fantastic, but also the virtual environment. I am surprised when we held this class during the learning series, Replant Your Menu, this past summer, just chefs connecting with other chefs across different regions just brings an enormous amount of energy. So we will continue that. And then we also have obviously a laser focus on balanced plant forward cycle menus, and which are refreshed, obviously, seasonality, and to best leverage the diverse range of crops, but also focusing on locally, sustainably harvested ingredients, right? So it might not always be one of the 70 ingredients that the list that we have, but it's something that may be just so relatively small, is unique to the local community. Sometimes it's like micro seasonal. It's only there for a month or two, and then we can leverage that for pop-ups and for delights and surprises to the Google community. We also plan on the plant forward. The recipe development is really much on plant forward cuisines, with meat become smaller and smaller piece, where the meat is more of an enhancement, or the dish turns into a flip entirely. And then the last thing we are looking at now is, can we plan our menus that measure the carbon footprint? So just like we cost the menu, now we can measure, how, as example, if a dish has beef, it has probably an incredible high amount of carbon footprint attached to it, versus maybe a vegan or a vegetarian dish. So that's something we're looking at now. That eventually we create our menus in that environment. We're really looking at the carbon footprint impact.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to jump in here. Thank you all so much for your insights and for the wonderful demo, William. We greatly appreciate it. Hopefully everyone out there will stay tuned for a moment, as we're going to throw back to our presenters for their top takeaway in a moment. But first, I just want to tell you a little bit about where we're heading next. We have a networking time coming up, sponsored by Nestle Professional. In sessions, we are going to have some Meet the Author conversations with Asha Gomez, Michael Harlan-Turkel, and Linda Shu. So be sure to check those out. We also, of course, had the networking tab open, where you have 4-minute video chats, just like you might bump into someone at the coffee station at a live event. And our question for today is, did you start or continue a garden during the pandemic? In addition, we have the Innovation Hub opening, where we have a number of live culinary demos, insightful presentations, and plant forward innovation showcased throughout all of those hubs. And so we'll enjoy networking for the next 20 minutes. Reminder that at the conclusion of today's networking coming up, tomorrow's session will start at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. So we'll look forward to seeing you back in the platform for our day 3. And before we fully wrap it up, I'm going to head back to our esteemed panelists. Stephanie, I'm going to throw it to you first. What is your top takeaway from this session?
Sure. I think challenge chefs. Ask them to compete. Ask them to get creative. They will always rise to the challenge.
I love it. Perfect. Christoph, your top takeaway?
Consuming a wide range of diverse crops is great for the planet, but it's also great for us humans.
Wonderful. And William?
I think dig deep. Don't look at just what you can replace to make plant forward. Think about how you can highlight or showcase that product.
Wonderful. And Ben, I'll throw it last to you.
Well, plant forward can be incredibly exciting, incredibly delicious, and it can be spun through any method of food delivery.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Thank you everyone out there for listening and for your insightful questions. Everyone enjoy networking, and then we'll see you back online tomorrow. Have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you to our sponsor, Food at Google, for this session.